Do you remember opening your eyes?
Yes, I just had the thought that my brother's going to be there somewhere, but he wasn't.
An Indian-born Australian businessman and author, Saru Brierley, at the age of 5, was accidentally separated from his biological family. Alone, unable to speak the language, and with no knowledge of where he'd come from, he had to beg to survive until he was rescued by an orphanage and adopted by an Australian family. From then on, he grew up an Australian and succeeded in his adoptive country. However, he was unable and unwilling to forget the land of his childhood. Do you think he returned to find his hometown and biological family? Keep watching as we delve into the story of Saru Brierley. Sheru Munshi Khan, Saru Brierley. Saru Brierley was born in Ganesh Talai, a suburb of Khandwa, Madhya Pradesh. His mother was a Hindu, while his father was a Muslim. When Saru was around 3 years old, his father abandoned the family after taking a second wife, throwing the family into abject poverty. His mother, who chose not to petition for a divorce, although she legally could have done so, worked in construction to support herself and her children. Nevertheless, she did not make enough money to feed them all and could not afford to send them to school. Saru and his elder brothers, Gudu and Kalu, began begging at the local railway station and at the market for food and money. His mother usually sent Saru with a bowl to ask neighbors for leftovers. Gudu sometimes obtained odd jobs such as washing dishes in a restaurant and sweeping the floors of train carriages. Saru and his brothers also stole food from bales of rice and chickpeas at the local railway station. They also pick unwatched fruit trees and vegetable patches. At one point, Gudu was arrested for violating child labor laws after selling toothbrush and paste kits at the railway station platform. Despite the law being intended to protect children, he was imprisoned for a few days. The ill-fated trip. Like many children in rural India, Saru rarely had enough to eat and often traveled on trains to beg for scraps with his older brother. But during one ill-fated trip in the evening in 1986, Gudu, who was working as a sweeper on India's trains, said he would ride the train from Khandwa to the city of Burhanpur, 70 kilometers to the south. Reluctantly, he allowed the 5-year-old Saru to join him. By the time the train reached Burhanpur, Saru was so tired he collapsed onto a seat on the platform. Gudu told his little brother to wait and promised to be back shortly. Gudu did not return, and Saru eventually became impatient. Unknown to Saru, Gudu had been hit and killed by an oncoming train. Saru noticed a train parked in the station and boarded an empty carriage, thinking his brother was on it. He found there were no doors to the adjoining carriages. Hoping his brother would come for him, he fell asleep. When he awoke, the train was traveling across an unfamiliar area. It was late at night. We got off the train, and I was so tired that I just took a seat at a train station, and I ended up falling asleep. That fateful nap would determine the rest of his life. I thought my brother would come back and wake me up, but when I awoke he was nowhere to be seen. I saw a train in front of me and thought he must be on that train. So I decided to get on it and hope that I would meet my brother, Saru said. Saru did not meet his brother on the train. Instead, he fell asleep and was shocked when he woke up 14 hours later. Occasionally, the train stopped at small stations, but Saru could not open the door to escape. Saru's rail journey eventually ended at the huge Howrah railway station in Calcutta, West Bengal, now known as Kolkata, and he fled when someone opened the door to his carriage. Calcutta is India's third biggest city and is notorious for its slums. Saru did not know it then, but he was nearly 1,500 kilometers from his hometown. I was absolutely scared. I didn't know where I was. I just started to look for people and ask them questions. Soon, he was sleeping rough. It was a very scary place to be. I don't think any mother or father would like to have their 5-year-old wandering alone in the slums and train stations of Calcutta. Initially, he attempted to return home by boarding different trains, but these proved to be on suburban lines, and each one eventually took Saru back to Howrah railway station. For a week or two, he lived in and around the station. He survived by scavenging food scraps in the street and sleeping underneath the station's seats. His need for food took him further out into the city. After days of homelessness on Calcutta's streets, he was found by a railway worker, who took him in and gave him food and shelter. Saru sensed something was wrong when the railway worker showed Saru to a friend. Saru fled and was pursued, but he managed to escape. He spoke Hindi, but most people in Calcutta spoke Bengali. He survived on the streets for 5 weeks by scavenging for food scraps. If you found food on the ground, you ate it, he says. Half-eaten, 3/4 ate, food that someone had just 5 seconds ago thrown away, you ate that. Being uprooted to Calcutta, however, plunged him into chaos. He subsisted by eating discarded food and drinking from faucets. At one point, he fled from a gang that abducted street children. At night, he slept beneath the railway station's seats. Trying to find his way home, he almost drowned in the Ganges and narrowly escaped abduction into child slavery. "There's no salvation at all," says Saru. "The only thing you could do is just try to survive one day at a time." Saru eventually met a teenager who took him to a police station and reported that he might be a lost child. The police took Saru to a government center for abandoned children. Weeks later, he was moved to the Indian Society for Sponsorship and Adoption on May 22, 1987, the day they designated his birthday in official papers. The staff there attempted to locate his family, but Saru did not know enough for them to trace his hometown sufficiently, and he was officially declared a lost child. In the meantime, his mother, Kamla Munshi, searched for her 2 sons. A few weeks after her sons failed to return home, police informed her that Gudu's body had been found near the railway tracks, having been killed by an oncoming train a kilometer from Burhanpur station. She then confined her energy to looking for Saru, traveling to different places on trains. She never gave up hope that Saru was still alive and would return someday. Years later, she opted to stay in Ganesh Talai rather than move in with Kalu's family in Burhanpur, so Saru could find her if he returned. Do you think Saru and his biological family will be reunited? Keep watching as we feed your curiosity. His adoption. Months later, word came that an Australian family had seen his photo and wanted to adopt him. He was adopted by the Brierley family of Hobart and moved there on September 1987. Sue and John Brierley took Saru halfway around the world to their home in Tasmania. Young Saru, a Hindi speaker, didn't understand Calcutta's Bengali dialect or even know the day he was born. So every year, Saru Brierley celebrates his birthday on May 22. But that wasn't the day he was born. It was the day he was found. His adoption by Sue and John Brierley provided salvation for the lost child. Saru's arrival was a kind of birth into our family. Sue tells people when they first met their son at an airport in Tasmania, "It was just a fantastic moment, filled with love and joy. They gave him chocolates, a book, and a stuffed koala toy." Brierley later named it Koala Dundee. "It didn't take us long to realize he had come from a good family," John says, with love around him. After life in a slum hovel, his new home was palatial. 4 bedrooms, a lounge, a kitchen, and a huge garden where he could play. He moved to Tasmania, starting a new life with a loving family. He had his room, and on his bed was the stuffed koala he named Koala Dundee, his favorite toy. Saru became a typical Australian youth, learning to swim and surf. He studied business and hospitality at the Australian International Hotel School in Canberra and earned a degree in business management. He joined his adoptive family's engineering firm and launched a hotel management career. So, did he forget his family? Of course not. Keep watching as we delve into how he searched for his biological family. Search for his family. Saru grew up in a happy Australian home, a stone's throw away from the beach. His Australian parents later adopted another boy from India, Macintosh. Mantosh became Saru's brother. Saru learned English and soon lost touch with Hindi. Surprisingly, the name Saru originated as a mispronunciation of his given name, Sheru. Unfortunately, Saru remained haunted by his turbulent, mysterious past and the family he had lost. Determined to rediscover his past, he embarked on a virtual odyssey of his homeland. He never gave up hope that he might one day return to his roots, but with no idea what it was called, it seemed an impossible dream. I kept in my head the images of the town I grew up in, the streets I used to wander, and the faces of my family. I treasured those memories. I remember its dusty smell, the screeching of brakes, shouting, and the pitter-patter of feet, he says of Khandwa to the Tasmania Mercury. He relied on his vague memories of the main features around Burhanpur railway station, although he knew little of the station's name, except that it began with the letter B. Late one night in 2011, he came upon a small railway station that closely matched his childhood recollection of where he had become trapped in an empty carriage. The name of this station was Burhanpur, which is very close to the phonetic spelling of the name he remembered from his childhood ordeal. He followed the satellite images of the railway line north and found the town of Khandwa. He had no recollection of that name, but the town contained recognizable features, such as a fountain near the train tracks where he used to play. He was able to trace a path through the streets to what appeared to be the place where he and his family used to live. Determined, he spent years looking at maps for signs of the landmarks he knew as a child, and eventually, he turned to Google Earth. With this, he realized he had found a way to search for the few remembered landmarks of his infancy: a water tower at the local station, a rock quarry, a river dam, and a bridge, which provides aerial views of the planet. He saw it as a chance to track down his birth family. Saru remembered traveling for around 14 hours on the train to Kolkata. He estimated the train's speed to be about 50 mph, so he calculated that his hometown could be around 1,000 miles from Kolkata. For 5 long years, Saru used every spare moment to search images of rural India within a 1,000-mile radius of Calcutta, tracing the spiderweb of railway lines. Saru then drew a circle on a map with Kolkata at the center. In an interview with NPR, Saru described how he singled out his town. He said, "I wondered, was this reality? He wondered, am I dreaming? Everything matched. Well, the first thing you're gonna see before you come to my hometown is the river where I used to play with my brothers, and the waterfall and the architecture of this particular place where I used to visit quite a lot. It has to be the same, otherwise I'd fly over and go somewhere else. When I found it, I zoomed on it and bang, it just came up. I navigated it from the waterfall where I used to play," Saru told the BBC. But even after he spotted what he believed to be the town where he had spent his earliest years, it took months for Saru to organize a trip to test out his theory. Following a lead, Saru contacted a Facebook group based in Khandwa. The Facebook group reinforced his belief that Khandwa might be his hometown. In February 2012, Saru traveled to the central Indian city of Khandwa. "If he wanted to explore that," says Sue, "we wanted him to be fully happy about his identity." Soon, he made his way to Khandwa. He found his way around the town with his childhood memories, the town he had discovered online. As he wandered through Khandwa, Brierley slowly retraced roads and pathways that began to snap into focus, following them until they led him to a familiar, dusty place filled with the sounds of screeching brakes, people shouting, and the pitter-patter of feet, his hometown. He asked residents if they knew of any family that had lost their son 25 years prior. He showed photographs of himself as a child in Hobart. Eventually, he found his own home in the neighborhood of Ganesh Talai, but it was not what he had hoped for. "When I got to the door, I saw a lock. It looks old and battered, as if no one had lived there for quite a long time." Saru had a photograph of himself as a child and still remembered his family's names. A neighbor said that his family had moved. Another person came, and then a third person turned up, and that is when I struck gold. He said, "Just wait here for a second and I shall be back." And when he did come back after a couple of minutes, he said, "Now I will be taking you to your mother." There, villagers took him to an elderly woman who looked back in shock. Surrounded by townsfolk, she stepped forward, knowingly reached out and touched her son. Brierley and his birth mother, Fatima, hugged tightly through tears. "It was the most pivotal moment of my life," he says. "I just felt numb and thought, am I hearing what I think I am hearing?" Saru was taken to meet his mother, who was nearby. At first, he did not recognize her. "The last time I saw her, she was 34 years old and a pretty lady. I had forgotten that age would get the better of her. But the facial structure was still there, and I recognized her and said, 'Yes, you are my mother.' She looked so much shorter than I remembered when I was a 4-year-old child, but she walked forward, and I walked forward, and my emotions, tears, and the chemical in my brain, was like a nuclear fusion. She grabbed my hand and took me to her house. She could not say anything to me. I think she was as numb as I was. She had a bit of trouble grasping that her son, after 25 years, had just reappeared like a ghost." Fatima recognized her son by the faded mark of a horse's hoof that had kicked him in the head when he was just a baby. "My Saru is back," she kept repeating. "It was the most pivotal moment of my life," says Saru. He was reunited with his sister, Shakila, and his surviving brother, Kalu, who is now a schoolteacher and factory manager. However, there was tragedy amid his joy. He learned that his brother, Gudu, who had taken Saru out on the night he became lost, had died the same night. falling from a train, perhaps in a desperate search for Saru. With the loss of Saru and Gudu, their mother had been able to afford to send the other two to school. Indian and international media extensively covered the reunion. Their reunion in 2012 made headlines worldwide, but now he has told his full story in a new book, A Long Way Home. We will discuss the book more, so keep watching to find out. He learned that his mother had also spent many tearful years searching for him, traveling miles to distant towns, begging for food to survive on her journey, and never imagining that Saru could have been swept away as far as Calcutta. She had searched stations, jails, and hospitals in vain. At the holy crypt of the Sufi Muslim saint Tekri Wale Baba, a mystic told Fatima with uncanny prescience, he doesn't remember where he is from. He will return, but only after a long, long time. We were extremely close, and when I walked out of India, the tearing thing for me was knowing that my older brother had passed away. For years, Saru Brierley went to sleep wishing he could see his mother again and his birth family. Now that he has, he feels incredibly grateful. He has kept in touch with his newly found family. It has taken the weight off my shoulders. I sleep a lot better now, and there is something to make him sleep better. With memories of Slumdog Millionaire still fresh, publishers and film producers are getting interested in his incredible story. A year after reuniting with his birth mother, Saru returned to Khandwa, India, to meet Fatima with his adoptive mother, Sue, with whom she now shared a fateful bond. With the help of a translator, the three came together. The earth seemed to be sort of moving, Sue says of that moment. I started to cry, and she hugged me. She said through the translator, "He's your son now. I give my son to you." We stood there for quite a while, just the three of us holding each other. Suddenly there was no noise. There was only our breathing. Saru has since returned more than a dozen times to India to visit Fatima and his biological family, whom he bought a house for. He's so lovely, Dev Patel says of Brierley. We met in Australia, and he is so generous. On one trip, he traveled first class on the Kolkata Mail, a train service from Mumbai to Kolkata, to retrace his journey of a quarter-century earlier. Saru's the epitome of just a fiercely driven young man, and he has an incredible memory. Down to the eggs I ordered at that meal, the clothes I wore, everything. He remembers crystal clear. Indeed, Saru holds on to things tightly. Nearly 30 years after arriving in Australia, he still has that stuffed koala toy his parents gave him at the airport. Gray, with bulging eyes that pop out of their sockets, is kept in a bedroom at his parents' house. He was the teddy bear that I could hold on to when I was having my dreams of fear, zooming back to the scary times in Calcutta, says Brierley, hoping his story will be a beacon to others. For people who have been in similar situations, wandering and yearning to find their loved ones, their family, or whatever it may be, I hope that this movie empowers them, he offers. Those close to him, for their part, keep a vow of their own. Says Sue, there was no way we were going to let him get lost again. Saru continues to live in Hobart. He and his Indian family can now communicate regularly, taking advantage of a computer at the home of one of Kalu's neighbors. Saru offered to bring his mother to Australia. Still, she said she preferred to stay in India, noting that she does not speak much Hindi or English, so it would be difficult to communicate if she moved to Australia. She also has cited cultural differences between Australia and India and has indicated that she prefers living in India. Saru Brierley book.
My brother just said, I'll stay here and I'll come back. And I just thought, well, I must.
25 years later, Saru Brierley wrote A Long Way Home. The book is a non-fiction book co-written with Larry Buttrose. In this autobiographical book, Saru covers 3 decades of his life, describing his ordeals and adventures as a lost 5-year-old in rural India, his adoption by a middle-class Australian family, and his search for his Indian native family some 25 years later. The text was initially released in Australia on 24 June 2013 via Viking, then re-released internationally in 2014 by Penguin Australia. The book earned critical acclaim. In an interview with ABC Radio Sydney, Larry Buttrose explained, "From the first time I came in contact with the story, I knew it was a fantastic story. It was a film crying to be made." Buttrose recorded hours of interviews with both Saru and his adoptive mother, and completed a 70,000-word manuscript in a hotel room in Kolkata to meet a tough 3-month deadline set by the publisher. Karina Weatherby of Vale Daily stated, "There is a real feeling of catharsis when reading Brierly's astounding narrative. The journey of the author as a boy, and then again as a young man, evokes the audacity of a fable, but it is set in the real world, a place where wonderment and miraculous occurrences can often seem wanting." Diane Dempsey of the Sydney Morning Herald commented, "Brierly writes straightforwardly without trying to do anything fancy except tell a remarkable story. In line the tale of his quest, he provides an informative and fascinating insight into how third world families live and somehow survive their poverty." Taylor Dibbert of International Policy Digest added, "It's not hard to understand why this work has received such high praise. This is an honest story of pain, struggle, hope, and love." He concludes the book on a reflective note. Brierly's journey is inspirational and deeply moving. It's another reminder of how potent passion and the human spirit are. Retitled Lion, the book was on the New York Times bestseller list for paperback nonfiction for 6 weeks during the first quarter of 2017. The book, adapted into the movie, Lion is the extraordinary tale of Saru, who found his family after being missing for 25 years, is a 2016 emotionally powerful movie directed by Garth Davis and starring Dev Patel, Nicole Kidman, David Wenham, and Rooney Mara, premiered to rave reviews and Oscar buzz at the 2016 Toronto International Film Festival. It received 6 nominations at the 89th Academy Awards, but did not take home any awards. Saru was portrayed in the film by newcomer Sunny Pawar and Dev Patel, who was nominated for the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor for his performance. In April 2019, Saru announced that he was searching for his father, who left him and his family when he was young. What are your thoughts on Saru reuniting with his old family, despite him being comfortable with his new family? Feel free to leave your thoughts in the comment section. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.